Dry wind. A freight train screams past, then everything goes quiet. Inside a tin roof warehouse by the tracks, men trade work contracts with a red stamp like it's currency. No chains, no shouting, just paper. A young woman signs without looking up like she's signing away her next 10 years. Then an older ranchman steps forward, doesn't bargain, doesn't smile. He only asks, "If you could choose, where would you go?" And he pays only to walk out holding a document, not a person. If you want the truth behind that signature, hit like, share, and subscribe. Elias Turner didn't look like a man who still believed in second chances. 60, maybe more. Sun-worn skin, a jaw that stayed tight even when he wasn't speaking. His coat was the color of old dust. His hands were rough and split, like they'd been fighting the land for years and losing on purpose. Out here, men like that didn't talk about the past. They just worked until the past got tired of chasing them. He walked Mara out of the depot without saying much. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like he didn't want her to think he was in a hurry to claim anything. The wind followed them down the road, dragging grit across the hard-packed dirt. Mara rode behind him on a smaller mare. Her shoulders were stiff. Her eyes stayed forward, not looking at the sky, not looking at him, just watching the space between them like it was the only thing keeping her alive. The contract sat in Elias's saddlebag, stamped, signed, official enough to ruin a life. And Mara knew it. She'd seen paper do worse things than a fist ever could. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was falling low. The land stretched out dry and quiet. A few tired fences, a water trough that needed fixing, a windmill that squeaked like it was complaining. Elias tied the horses first, checked the latch, checked the gate, the same routine, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a canteen. He didn't step close. He held it out from a distance, like offering food to something that might bolt. "Water," he said, one word, no softness, no warmth, just a fact. Mara stared at the canteen. Her fingers twitched once, like she expected a slap to follow kindness. Then she took it, drank slow, never breaking eye contact with the ground. Elias set a small sack on a barrel near the porch. A chunk of bread, a strip of dried beef, not much. Enough to prove he wasn't trying to starve her into obedience. "Cabins there," he said, nodding toward a low building off to the side. It wasn't the main house, wasn't a barn stall either. Just a plain little place with a door that closed, a window with a cracked pane, a bed with a thin blanket. Elias didn't say, "You're safe." Men who say that usually aren't. He just turned and started walking away, like the conversation was done. Mara's voice cut through the quiet. Sharp, controlled. "You've got my paper." Elias stopped, but he didn't turn around. Mara stepped closer. Not too close. Never too close. "If you're holding that contract," she said, "then you can tell me what you want." Her chin lifted. Her eyes finally met his. No begging in them, no gratitude. Just a hard, steady line. What job? What hours? What rules? A pause. Then she added, flat as a nail, "You paid for it. So, do it." The words weren't an invitation. They were a shield. It was easier to offer your body than to offer your trust. Elias's shoulders tensed like he'd been struck. He took a long breath, slow, like he had to force air into himself. Then he turned. His eyes were tired. Not kind. Not cruel. Just worn down to something honest. "I didn't buy you," he said. His voice was low, steady. "I bought the paper." Mara didn't blink. "That paper is me." Elias looked past her, out toward the empty land. like he couldn't stand to look at what he'd been part of. "Out here," he said. "Paper turns people into debt." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled the contract out. He didn't wave it. He didn't brandish it. He held it like it burned. "I bought it," he said, "so it wouldn't end up with someone who'd use it the way you're expecting." Mara let out a quiet laugh. No humor in it. Men always say that. Elias nodded once, like he agreed. Like he'd heard it before. Like he'd said it before, in a different life, and hated himself for it. He set the contract on the porch rail, not in his pocket, not tucked away. Visible. A choice. A warning. "A bed's in that cabin," he said. "If you want the door barred from the inside, do it." Mara stared at him. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not hope. Not yet. Just confusion. Elias turned again and walked toward the corral. He picked up a hammer, started fixing a loose board, one nail at a time. No speech, no promise, just work. Mara watched him for a long moment. Then she looked at the contract sitting in plain sight, stamped, legal, cold. It didn't matter how gentle a man sounded. A seal could still own you. And Mara knew something else too. In the West, it wasn't always rope that kept a person in place. Sometimes it was ink. Sometimes it was a stamp, pressed hard enough to leave a mark. She took the food sack, not as thanks, as payment for staying alive one more night. Then she walked to the cabin. Slow. Careful. Like any kindness could still be a trap. Inside, she didn't sit on the bed. She stayed near the door, back to the wall, eyes on the room, listening, waiting. Outside, Elias kept hammering. The sound carried through the dry air, steady, dull, like a heartbeat trying to remember how to be human. And between them, the ranch stayed quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a truth finally breaks through. The days at the ranch began to settle into a rhythm. Morning light. Dust in the air. The same wind scraping the land clean, again and again. Mara worked without being told. She fixed what was broken, fed what needed feeding, kept her eyes on her hands and her thoughts to herself. She didn't rush. She didn't linger. She worked like someone who knew that staying invisible was safer than being noticed. Elias kept his distance, not out of fear, out of discipline. He spoke only when the work demanded it, pointed, nodded, moved on. No questions about her past, no offers of kindness that needed to be repaid, just space. And space, out here, could feel like mercy. By the fourth day, the fences were straighter. The trough stopped leaking. The night stayed quiet, too quiet. That was when the dust rose on the road. 3 horses, heavy steps, not lost men. Men who expected doors to open when they arrived. Mara saw them first. She paused mid-step, one hand still gripping the handle of a bucket. Elias followed her gaze. His jaw tightened. The riders didn't carry rifles in their hands. They didn't need to. The man in front wore a dark coat and a clean hat. Paper clean. Law clean. He dismounted slow, boots hitting the ground with the confidence of someone who'd never had to ask permission. "Afternoon," he said. His eyes slid past Elias and landed on Mara, not on her face, on her posture, like he was reading a line of print. "I'm here about a contract," he said. "Railway District." He reached into his coat and pulled out a metal stamp. Steel. Heavy. It caught the light when he turned it. A dull shine. The kind of object that didn't look dangerous until it was pressed down hard enough to leave a mark. Elias stepped forward, just enough to break the line between them. She's working here, Elias said. The man smiled. Working is fine, he said. Ownership is what I'm here to clarify. He looked back at Mara. What's your name? Mara didn't answer. The silence stretched. The man didn't push. He simply nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. He turned to Elias. Contract status, he asked. Valid. Transferred. Signed. Elias didn't move. She's not a debt here, he said. The man's smile widened. That's not your call. He stepped past Elias and set the stamp down on the fence rail. Metal on wood. A soft sound. Final. The law decides, he said. And the law likes its paperwork clean. He tapped the stamp once. Signatures matter. Mara felt it then. Not fear. Recognition. She'd heard that tone before. Men who didn't need to raise their voice because the paper did the hurting for them. She looked at Elias. Really looked. And for the first time, she noticed it. Not anger. Not violence. Fear. Not of the men. Of the stamp. Of what it could prove. Of what it could pull back into the light. The inspector mounted his horse again. We'll be back, he said. Soon. Then they were gone. Dust hanging in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. Elias stood still long after they disappeared. Mara picked up her bucket and finished the job. No comment. No accusation. But something had shifted. That night. The wind came up strong. It rattled the loose boards, carried grit through the cracks. Sleep didn't come easy. Mara waited until the lantern burned low, until the ranch settled into its bones. Then she reached into the small bundle of things she'd carried through too many hands. A folded cloth, a broken comb, and something hard, flat, cold. A wage tag, stamped, scratched with a name that wasn't hers anymore. She turned it over, and there it was. A mark she hadn't noticed before. A transfer number. Faded. Old. Proof of a first move. A first signature. Her fingers closed around it. Not shaking. Just steady. She finally understood. Chains weren't always iron. Sometimes they were ink. Sometimes they were legal. Sometimes they were pressed down once, years ago, and kept holding long after the hand that signed forgot. The next morning, Elias found her at the trough. She held the tag out, didn't accuse, didn't ask, just showed him. Elias's face went pale. He took it like it weighed more than it should. There's something I owe you, he said. His voice was low, rough, but not yet. Mara nodded. She didn't trust the words, but she trusted what she'd seen, and that was enough to keep her standing, for now. The wind came in hard that night, dry, sharp. It rattled the boards like it was trying to get inside. Elias sat at the small table, oil lamp low, hands wrapped around a tin cup he hadn't touched. Across from him, Mara stood still. She didn't pace, didn't hesitate. She reached into her coat and placed something on the table. A wage tag. Old. Scratched. The name half worn away. Metal against wood. A small sound. Heavy enough. Elias looked at it. Didn't move. Didn't ask. Mara broke the silence. Do you know where this came from? Her voice was calm, not accusing, not curious, just exact. Elias stared at the tag like it might disappear if he waited long enough. The lamp flickered. The room felt smaller. He swallowed. I've seen those before, he said. Mara didn't sit. She turned the tag over. Slow, careful. On the back, faint but clear, was a transfer number. And beneath it, a signature. His signature. Younger. Straighter. Confident. The kind of signature a man uses when he doesn't think the mark will follow him. Mara slid a folded paper beside the tag. A copy. Old contract. Legal. Stamped. Signed. The first transfer. Her first move. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. Elias leaned back like the chair had given out beneath him. The room went quiet in a way that hurt. A long quiet. The kind with no exits. He closed his eyes. Not to hide. To remember. I worked those desks, he said finally. Long time ago. His voice was low. Dry. I wasn't important. Just another man pushing paper. He opened his eyes. That day, there were dozens of contracts. All backed up. All urgent. All lawful. He laughed once. Short. Ugly. They told me. Sign it and move on. Mara watched him. Unblinking. I knew it wasn't right, Elias said. I knew it wasn't clean. He stared at his hands. But I told myself, one signature doesn't hurt anyone. A pause. I told myself I was just keeping the machine running. The wind slammed against the wall again. Mara didn't react, didn't flinch. She nodded once, like she'd already known, like this was confirmation, not revelation. There was no shouting, no tears. That was the worst part. She stepped back from the table, put distance between them, between herself and the paper. Elias felt it then. Not anger, not hatred. Something heavier, the kind of judgment that doesn't need words. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. Mara didn't answer. I'm not asking you to understand, he went on. And I'm sure as hell not asking you to forget. He pushed the papers toward her. Slow. Careful. I didn't bring you here to clean my conscience, he said. I brought you here so you'd have a choice. Mara's eyes flicked to the documents, then back to him. And if my choice is to burn this place to the ground? She asked. Elias nodded. Then I'll hand you the match. Silence again. Thick. Pressing. This was the moment most men begged, promised, defended themselves with good intentions. Elias did none of that. He stayed where he was, waiting, accepting. Mara picked up the papers, not gently, not roughly, like someone handling a weapon they finally understood. She folded them once, twice, slid them into her coat. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say anything at all. She turned toward the door, stopped with her hand on the latch. I figured it out when you flinched at the stamp, she said. Elias looked up. You were never afraid of losing me, she went on. You were afraid of what the paper would say out loud. She opened the door. The wind rushed in, cold, clean. I'm not here to save you, she said. And I'm not here to punish you. She looked back once. I'm here because I decide to be. Then she stepped out into the night. The door closed. Elias stayed at the table. The lamp burned low. The contract was gone. But the weight of it stayed. He didn't chase her, didn't call her name. He sat there and let the silence do what it needed to do. Outside, the wind kept moving, and for the first time in a long while, Elias Turner didn't try to outrun what he'd signed. Morning didn't bring relief. It just brought light. Mara woke before the sun and chose where to stand. She didn't wait for instructions, didn't ask what was expected. She took the small jobs, the ones that kept her near the edges, fixing a hinge, hauling water, keeping space between herself and the house. Elias noticed. He didn't comment. He let her choose her hours, let her choose when to stop. No thanks asked for, no forgiveness offered. That was the new order. Late that afternoon, Elias left a single sheet of paper on the barrel by the trough, not folded, not hidden, signed, stamped, a termination notice. The contract. Undone. He didn't hand it to her. He walked away and started working on the gate. The iron one. Rusty hinges. A latch that had always been kept tight. Metal scraping metal. Mara watched him from a distance. When she finally picked up the paper, her hands didn't shake. She read it once, then again, not to be sure, to understand what it meant. This wasn't a favor. This was something being returned. She folded the paper and slipped it into her coat, not like a gift, like a tool. Elias kept working, didn't turn around. Some punishments don't come from a judge. They come from having to live inside the truth you avoided, day after day, knowing there's no sentence that will end it for you. That's the kind that lasts. Mara understood something then. Forgiveness wasn't a door. It wasn't something you opened and invited the past back inside. It was a line you drew so you could breathe without bleeding. She didn't move closer. She didn't soften. She just stopped being cornered. That night, the wind died down. The gate stood open, not wide, just enough. Not an invitation, an acknowledgement. Mara chose one thing to fix the next morning. The water channel, cracked boards, a slow leak wasting what little they had. She worked alone. No audience, no announcement. When she finished, the water ran clean. Elias saw it from across the yard. He nodded once. That was all. Nothing had been healed. Nothing had been erased. But the rules had changed. Space was respected. Choices were real. And sometimes, that's the closest thing to peace a place like this allows. The inspector came back a week later. Same coat. Same calm voice. This time, he didn't ask about paperwork. He asked about people. He stood near the fence and looked at Mara like a choice written in pencil. "You want to file a complaint," he said. "Everything you need is already here." Mara didn't answer right away. She looked past him, at the yard, at the gate that no longer latched, at Elias, standing where he always stood now, far enough away to matter. She wasn't measuring forgiveness. She was measuring distance, how far she'd come, how far back this could pull her. She didn't defend Elias, didn't explain him, didn't soften anything. She reached into her coat and touched the folded papers. The proof, the signature, the seal. Then she did something quieter than justice. She kept them, not as leverage, not as mercy, as ownership. The inspector watched her a moment longer, then nodded. "Your call," he said. When he left, nothing felt resolved. That's the part most stories skip, because some wounds don't close. They don't vanish. They just stop bleeding, like scar tissue. Stiffer, more sensitive, but no longer open. People think healing looks like relief. It usually looks like restraint, like choosing not to step where you know the ground will give way. The biggest changes never happen at the loudest moment. They happen after, in the days that follow, when there's no one watching, no confession left to make, just a different way of waking up, a different way of standing in the same space. Mara stayed, for now, not because she trusted, because she wasn't trapped. Elias lost contracts, lost standing, lost sleep. But he kept the one thing he didn't before: the truth, and the weight of it. Some people don't get punished by the law. They get punished by having to live honestly for the rest of their lives. There was no promise at the end of this. No reconciliation speech. No music swelling. Mara might leave tomorrow, or next month. Elias might lose the land, or keep working it in silence. That's how real change works. Not clean, not complete, just different enough to move forward. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you ever signed something just to get it done, how would you make it right now? And if you've been hurt, really hurt, what boundary would you draw, so you don't have to carry that anger forever?